Hello everyone. The cartilaginous joint, which will be covered here, is the second type of joint that we will cover based on structure. The first one was covered in a previous presentation, which was the fibrous joint. This cartilaginous joint is going to be made up of the solid connective tissue, and because it is solid, it allows little or no movement, as you can imagine. Therefore, it can also be classified as either an amphiarthrosis or a synarthrosis. Due to the fact that there is little or no movement between the bones, this means that these articulating bones, they will be tightly connected either by a hyaline cartilage or by a fibrocartilage. And there are three types of cartilaginous joints, as we can see over here. The first one is a synchondrosis. Then we go to a symphysis, and last we have the epiphyseal cartilage, which we will cover in the next few slides. First, let's talk about synchondrosis, not to be confused with syndesmosis, which was a type of fibrous joint that we discussed in the previous learning outcome. Also, remember, chondro means cartilage, and this joint, it will be made up of hyaline cartilage. Will also be slightly movable to immovable. Therefore, it will go from being an amphiarthrosis to sometimes being a synarthrosis. And an example of a synchondrosis will be the articulation between the first rib and the manubrium of the sternum, as we can see right over here. All other ribs, they do have a synovial joint, which will be the type of joint that we're covering in the next learning outcome. The second type of cartilaginous joint is what we call a symphysis. If it's plural, it's with an E. If it's singular, it's with an I. And it's mainly going to be made up of fibrocartilage. We have three main examples. First, you can see right over here in the image of the pelvic girdle, you will notice how the two pelvic girdles are going to be united in the midline by this flat disc made up of fibrocartilage. And this fibrocartilage at this joint will be called a pubic symphysis, as it will unite the two pubis of the coxal bone right in the midline. The second example is the articulation between the manubrium and the body of the sternum, as we can see right over here on this image. And the third one will form what we call the intervertebral discs between the vertebrae, as we can see right over here. It is safe to say that all symphysis will occur in the midline of the body, as we can see on these examples. So the pubic symphysis is right in the midline. The sternum is right in the midline. And also the intervertebral discs that belong between the vertebrae is going to be in the midline, located posteriorly. Also, most of these joints, they will be able to perform little movement, providing limited range of motion, and are therefore, for most part, considered amphiarthrosis based on this limited movement. We can also add that the intervertebral disc is going to be important because it will function as this very important shock-absorbing pad between the vertebral bodies. Lastly, we have what we call the epiphyseal cartilage, which is made up of hyaline cartilage, and it's going to be located in the epiphysis of the bone, more specifically between the epiphysis and the diaphysis, in this structure that's called the epiphyseal plate. And we did cover this when we talk about endochondral ossification. Now, since this joint is only present during bone growth, they're not really a joint associated with movement. Also, this joint is an immovable joint, which means that it's a synarthrosis type of joint. The other thing that we can add is that this epiphyseal plate, once the bone is fully formed, it will become what we call the epiphyseal line, and this line is usually not very well seen. Therefore, we can say that the epiphyseal cartilage will become a synostosis, which we covered on the previous learning outcome when we were talking about the sutures that are formed in the fontanelles of the frontal bone.